Alright, my N7 friends, time for a different kind of video today. So with the release of the new Godzilla vs. Kong trailer, I thought that maybe we should try to do one of these very different what-ifs. So let's get right into it. Godzilla, king of the monsters and Earth's ultimate protector. Who doesn't know this guy? Godzilla is known over the entire world, sort of like Superman. Wherever you go, you utter the name Godzilla and that spiky spine just instantly pops into everyone's head. So what is Godzilla? Well, if you still need a short explanation, he's what is known as a kaiju, or a giant monster if you translate from Japanese to English. He might not have been the absolute first monster to pop up on the silver screen, but he really has become the most memorable. Its latest outings from 2014's Godzilla and 2019's King of the Monsters really shows how powerful he is. In Godzilla 2014, he is introduced as a walking natural disaster, literally, bringing tsunamis with him wherever he goes and tremors that are felt for kilometers. In the last part of the film, he shows off his signature ability, which is called atomic breath. An official Godzilla guidebook has stated that the atomic breath has the temperature of 500,000 degrees Celsius. That's 100 times the temperature of the surface of the sun. This basically means that it can melt almost anything, or is at least so powerful that it can completely severely damage any other kaiju. Even in King of the Monsters, when he fights King Ghidorah, Godzilla goes into a supercritical state, which causes him to literally melt the environment around him. So for that short explanation of Godzilla, let's go right into the Reapers. As we all know on this channel, or anyone who has played Mass Effect, the Reapers are an intergalactic race that are basically bent on murder and complete destruction. They have their reasons. You can argue with that reason of why they do what they do. That doesn't change the fact that they're absolute murder machines. The Reaper capital ships stand at approximately 2 kilometers in height, so we already know here that the size difference is pretty major between Godzilla and a Reaper. Now, when you look at clips from Mass Effect 3, you can tell that not all the models are this size. They probably stand at around 1 kilometer tall if we're going by the wiki and the known game information. Then these capital ships are 2 kilometers long approximately. So what makes the Reapers so terrifying and so dangerous? Well, if we just look at the fact that they've completely erased almost all life in the galaxy for thousands or for 100,000 cycles, because they return to reap the galaxy every 50,000 years. So we can't really put Godzilla in a matchup against all the Reapers, because we all know what would happen. But if we faced Godzilla against one Reaper, say, why not Sovereign? Would he be able to beat Sovereign? So let's for this matchup say that Sovereign didn't have his brethren, and the Reapers never got the signal, or they were still sleeping in dark space. So Sovereign decided to take matters into his own hand and directly confront humanity by attacking Earth. Now, as most of Mass Effect fans know, he would never do this because Sovereign is not that stupid. We can still, for the sake of it, imagine that he would. Because the Alliance Navy, or the fleets in Mass Effect, proved to be basically paper tissue against any Reaper, Sovereign would prove a difficult enemy to face for humanity on their own, even before they even knew about the Reaper's existence. So let's say that the Reaper, Sovereign, lands on Earth and he starts a fight with Godzilla, who is the protector of Earth. So we know that Godzilla grew from 2014 to 2019, he grew to 119 meters, which basically means that he is at about a 20th of the size of Sovereign. This would basically be like putting a can of soda on the ground. That can of soda is now Godzilla versus you, who in this case is Sovereign. That's approximately the size difference. So in first imagination, you would think that, oh, but Sovereign only has to step on him. And that's true, he could, but we also know that Godzilla is not that dumb. If he sees a giant murder robot or a gigantic Cthulhu-like squid appear in front of him or land on Earth and just start shooting lasers everywhere. We know from the movies that Godzilla doesn't back down from a fight, but he's not stupid, even if he uses a lot of brute force sometimes. If we look at the history of Godzilla, we know that he utilizes different kinds of strategies to defeat his opponents. Now, the only thing I think Godzilla would have a problem with, it's pretty hard for him to actually damage Sovereign. You see, a Reaper has 5 legs, and at each part of their kneecaps, that is where approximately Godzilla would be in size. So what Godzilla would have to do is to somehow cap Sovereign's knees and destroy his feet or his knees, so to speak. Doing this, or at least just doing it to one leg, could prove sufficient. It could prove enough to cause an imbalance for Sovereign so that he can't really stand upright anymore. It could possibly disrupt his mass effect field, so Sovereign might wobble around and might lose his stability and fall over. It seems to me, or from what we've known from Mass Effect, that if a capital ship like Sovereign would fall, the tremendous amount of weight and the loss of its mass effect field would probably mean that Sovereign could die just from the fall alone. Maybe not necessarily die, because his mind would still be working. His indoctrination field would still be online. And it could affect people around him to fight for him against Godzilla. But as we all know, humans are just puny insects to Godzilla, and we can't really harm him unless we use a oxygen destroyer against him. And that's a weapon that humanity doesn't really have a lot of. So let's just, for the sake of it, say, because Godzilla has proven time and time again to be able to overpower foes that are many times his size, and that's why he is known as the Earth's greatest protector. So let's, for the sake of it, say that he could possibly destroy one of Sovereign's legs, or at least part of it. If that would happen, he could possibly defeat Sovereign, because, as we said before, losing the Mass Effect field could cause him to fall over. And maybe he doesn't even have to lose his Mass Effect field. Maybe the instability would prove enough to fell the Reaper. But there's one thing we haven't considered yet, and that's the fact that Sovereign has a weapon, as does every other capital ship, and so does every Reaper. That is the laser-like beam that Reapers can shoot from their appendages or from their eyes. These beams are molten metal that are fired at a fraction of the speed of light. This is enough to, as I said before, rip through Alliance ships like tissue paper, which basically means that if Sovereign shot at Godzilla and hit him, it could very well be game over for Godzilla. But then again, we know that King Ghidorah shoots something called gravity beams, and we know these beams are extremely powerful, and yet they don't seem to be able to harm Godzilla that much. So it might be possible that the molten metal that Sovereign shoots at Godzilla might not affect him as much as Sovereign hopes it does. Another problem we have with Sovereign is that he is very big, so moving around would prove to be a problem for him. As Godzilla, even if he is big or as tall as a skyscraper, he would still be able to move around relatively quickly compared to Sovereign. So I actually see this as a favor somewhat to Godzilla, considering what we've seen from him so far, and from the old movies up until the newer movies. He could possibly melt through Sovereign's legs, even if his atomic breath couldn't do that, considering the flame he shoots canonically is at 500,000 degrees Celsius. Even if this doesn't work, he could possibly rip through the metal of Sovereign's legs, as Godzilla treats buildings like tissue paper. I would wager that a Reaper's leg is harder and would prove problematic, but I still believe that if Sovereign decided to land on Earth and choose to fight Godzilla, it might still go in Godzilla's favor because of how huge and slow Sovereign is. That is, if Godzilla would be able to avoid these superheated beams. Now, if Sovereign would attack from space, if Sovereign would choose to go the route of orbital bombardment, that could very well be the game over for Godzilla. Now, we can't really say what would happen if Godzilla's atomic breath would collide with the superheated metallic beam that the Reaper shoots, but I imagine that it would result in the molten metal maybe scattering from the sheer pressure of Godzilla's atomic breath. So really, this one is a toss-up. I don't have all the statistics because I'm not a mathematician, so I can't tell you what the probabilities are, but these are my scenarios that I can think of in my head of what could possibly happen. We know that the Reapers aren't indestructible. Godzilla is extremely powerful. We know that the Reapers are too, but they're relatively clumsy compared to a kaiju. I'm still going to say that the Reaper Armada would make short work of Godzilla, but putting Sovereign or maybe even a Harbinger against Godzilla on their own might prove enough to say that Godzilla possibly could win this fight. Bigger is not always better. What do you guys think? Do you actually think that Sovereign would step on Godzilla and crush him like a soda can? Do you think that maybe Godzilla would have some form of a chance against Sovereign? Do you agree? Maybe he could destabilize a Reaper walking on the ground? And do you agree with me about the orbital bombardment? Considering that Sovereign would be out of harm's way from Godzilla if he chose to go that route. I just thought this would be an interesting matchup. I like versus matches, but I don't like when things go in the heated direction. So if you have any thoughts, please write them down below, but please be civil and don't start arguing with each other. We can all have a civilized discussion and talk about this like gentlemen. Anyway, if you guys want me to make any more of this stuff, I would gladly do so. You can always leave suggestions for any other videos. But for now, this is all I got. And no, I didn't film my face today. I'm sorry. You will have to wait for that beautiful shape of my face for another day. MrHulthen out.